Hello music lovers, welcome back. This week we are following on from last week's beginner chord questions. Some of these are slightly less beginner level, but just as useful, and should follow on nicely if you manage to keep up with last week's episode. Let's go. DJ Rob Oak asked, how can we do that 164 trick in FL Studio? Please help. Crying clown emoji. Yes, so if you're brand new to production, or music in fact, you might not know what I'm explaining here in 99% of my videos is just general music theory. It's not specific to any particular software, or instrument in fact. Yes, I personally use Ableton these days, but this black and white pattern has been around for hundreds of years. It's not specific to Ableton, or any software at all in fact. You will have the equivalent MIDI or piano roll, as it's called, in your music program of choice. These A, B, C notes in this program are exactly the same as any other program, or instrument like guitar, piano, synth. For example, the A note is just what we called the pitch that vibrates at 440 times a second. Doesn't matter how that pitch is produced, be it a human singing it or a piece of software. An A is an A. And the same goes for all the other stuff, like how we build chords. It's all completely universal music knowledge. You can apply it anywhere. Enjoy. Peter asked, most people talk about 1, 4 and 5 chords. Is 164 exclusive to EDM or dance? Great question, Peter, thank you. Yes, 1, 4 and 5 is very common, but for different reasons. 145 is more often used at the composition stage, the writing stage. Let's listen to it while we talk about it.
Don't forget about me and all the things I could give to you, baby. But I guess you can't see.
Sounds fine with this vocal. The reason 1, 4 and 5 are more common at the composition stage is related to something called functional harmony. 1, 4 and 5 all have different functions. I explained functional harmony in my garage chord video. Go see that if you want the full explanation. But in a nutshell, chord 1's function is to be home, chord 4's function is to be going away from home, and chord 5's function is to be returning to home. Between the three of them, they cover all of your main chord stories, if you will. This works best when you are writing the melody to the chords. Whereas what we're trying to do here is the other way round. We are trying to get chords to fit to an unknown melody in a sample. And the reason 164 works better for that is because of this through line here. Notice all of these chords contain note 1. And generally, melodies will use note 1 most often, especially for their resolutions. So to maximize the chances of our chords working with an unknown melody, it's better to choose 1, 6 or 4. That's the only reason. It's not exclusive to EDM or dance. If we take a look at the notes in chord 5, we have 5, 7 and 2. Now I'm generalizing here, of course, but the chances of a melody landing on those notes is much less, especially the 7 or the 2. But it does not rule it out. If 1, 6 and 4 aren't working, this might be why, so you can try 5 in their place. And of course, many a dance classic has used the 145. Here's probably the most famous example. Live from the Glampad asked, how do you write chords to the different sections, i.e. verse, chorus, bridge, etc.? Well, my first answer would be you don't. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but that's actually very common. This depends a lot on genre, but changes you're hearing in modern tracks will often just be arrangement changes. Just a significant change in the melody might make you think you're hearing different chord progression, or the piano coming in and out, or the drums coming in and out, the bass, etc. Arrangement changes can make different sections sound very different, even without changing the chord structure. If that idea is sounding too boring for you, sure, try swapping the order of the chords about, although this 164 hack in this video It's probably a little too limiting for your options. You might need to play around with the other chords. But what I will warn you of is this. The mood or vibe of a track is not just governed by its total scale. The chord progression does set that too. And if you change it up too often, you can be in risk of losing the audience. A chord progression can be a hook too. And changing your hooks around too often can lead to confusion, or your track just being less memorable overall. I would advise you start by keeping it simple, especially if you're new. It's not cheating or a cop-out to keep things simple. A lot of hit tracks have simple or no chord structures which stay the same throughout the entire track. Don't let it worry you. The last question from the tree in our little chat was, how about borrowed chords? Will they work? Someone's been watching my Dead Mouse video. Make sure to watch that video if you want the full explanation. But in a nutshell, borrowed chords are when you borrow a chord from a neighbouring scale. For example, we are in A minor here, but it's entirely possible to try borrowing chords from A major. First of all, we need to work out what 1, 6 and 4 are in A major. Again, assuming we don't know our scales or have any software, it's very easy to do. As I showed earlier, we just take all the white notes from C. That makes a major scale. There's all 7 notes, but we only want 1, 4 and 6. Lovely. Now, let's build our chords. Make sure everything is on white notes. So this is now chords 1, 4 and 6 in C major. To get 1, 4 and 6 in A major, we just move this whole thing so that our 1, our C, is now on A. Let's have a listen if any of these work under our vocal. I'm just going to try one chord at a time.
Don't forget about me and all the things I could give.
Yeah, I'm not so keen. Delete. Let's try chord 4.
Don't forget about me and all the things I could give to you, babe.
Sounds okay here. If it was the third chord in the sequence. That's a keeper. Let's move that over. Does chord 6 work at all?
Don't forget about me and all the things I could give to you, baby.
Not for me. This chord 4 though, that sounded like it had promise. I have an idea. Let's bring the minor progression back. I want to try a 1, 6, 4, 4. But with the first of those chord 4s being borrowed from the major. Let's see how that sounds.
Don't forget about me and all the things I could give to you, baby. But I guess you can't see, making new memories with me. What happened to forever?
Very interesting. A bit more hopeful sounding. So there you go. Yes, borrowed chords can work. It's going to be entirely dependent on the vocal melody. As with the rest of my advice in this video, go with your ears, go with your feelings. But now you know how to do it if you want to give it a try. Now, just to clear something up from the tree's question, the example they used was borrowing chords from A minor if they were in C major. And that's a slightly different thing to borrowed chords, because A minor is what we call the relative minor of C major. As you saw earlier, they share all the same white notes. The pattern is different. The major versus minor is different because of the starting point, not because of the actual notes. So because they share notes, they share all the same chords. The numbers are different, but they're the same chords. So we can't call that borrowed chords because there are no new notes. What that would be called is chord substitution. And to answer your question, yes, that can also work. I've got a little example lined up here. This vocal is in C major, and here is 1, 6, 4, 6 in C major.
I'll slow the whole world down for you. If you want me to. If you want me to. I'll make it all up to if you want me to, if you want me to.
Very upbeat, but we can substitute in, well, all the chords from A minor if we want, and you'll often find this makes it a little more melancholy.
Oh, world time for you, if you want me to, if you want me to, I'll make it all up to you, if you want me to, if you want me to.
Again, this is not all or nothing. We can mix and match and just pick which ones we'd rather. Let's just take these.
Oh, world time for you, if you want me to, if you want me to, I'll make it all up to you, if you want me to, if you want me to.
Again, be listening out for the feel change. This will definitely change the feel of the track. But yes, you can absolutely substitute in chords from the relative minor. So, the neglected goat asked, if I chop up a vocal to make a new hook, does that change the key? And if so, how do we tell? That's an interesting one. Your answer is no, it doesn't, but it can do. Let me show you what I mean by that. Let's quickly chop up a vocal, shall we? Yep, I think I know what to do here. Something like this. Something like that. That should work. Let's have a listen back. Now, if your chops are just time-based, like I've done here, cut and paste, repeats across the timeline, etc., then the original key still applies, obviously. However, in certain circumstances, this new hook may be compatible with more keys. And that's because by chopping up the melody, you may have reduced the number of notes in the melody. And less notes means potentially more compatible keys and scales. Let me explain. Let me show you what's going on under the hood so I can explain this a little better. Here I have written down the melody as MIDI notes, a simplified version anyway. So that's our melody. You can see all of the notes here. Now, in a sample, you're not going to know these notes, obviously. That's the point of this exercise. But this is just to show you what can potentially happen when we chop up a sample. So in my case, we've chopped up and repeated the word okay. And as you can see, she's singing the word okay on these two notes here. So our new hook is only made of two notes. We've reduced the melody from a 5-note melody to a 2-note melody. So, as you might be able to imagine, the number of keys that share these two notes is a lot higher than the number of keys that would share all 5 of the other notes. Off the top of my head, I can think of 8 or 9 already. Now, I could show you them all, but that's not the point here. We don't know the notes of our melody in reality, but hopefully that explains why a new key is possible, having chopped up a sample. As for you figuring out what new keys would be possible, there's actually quite a straightforward hack, because any notes we've taken from an existing key must be related to that key in some way. And lucky for us, about 350 years ago, someone came up with this system, the circle of fifths. And I know what you're thinking. Isn't that the Camelot wheel? Yes, it is. Mixed in Key decided to steal the circle of fifths, add some colour, and some arbitrary numbers for some reason, and then claim it as their own. Yes, they actually tried to reinvent the wheel. Apparently A, B, C, D, E, F, G is too complicated for DJs. They'd rather remember 1B and have everything start on G sharp for some reason, because that's simpler, right? Okay, rant over. Anyway, the circle of fifths tells us our nearest related keys. So we were in A minor, and as you can see, our nearest related keys are E minor or D minor. So our first suspects for new possible keys are those. Let's give it a go. So let's mute the piano for now, separate our bass off into its own section, and let's move the bass to D. Let's change the octave of this high one down here. Okay. Seems okay. Let's try with the piano. Just grab all of this up to D. Yep, that works. Let's try E. Everything up 2. Yeah, doesn't work as well as D, does it? But you get the idea. And if you wanted, you could keep going in that direction. So your next options would be G minor or B minor. And don't forget your relative majors are options as well. So as you can see from A minor, the relative major is C. These are the ones on the outside. And either side of that, we could try G major or F major. Okay, now having said all that, before you get too excited trying out all your new key options, let me just state that this is something we would really only want to do if this chopped up hook was now our only hook. Meaning we are no longer using the original sample. Because what we typically don't want to do is change the key mid-track. That's straying into more jazzy territory. It's going to change the mood significantly. It's going to be quite a surprise. In fact, let me show you how that would sound. So our better option was D, wasn't it? Let me revert everything back to D. So here's how it sounds, changing key mid-track. As you can hear, quite the change-up. And not necessarily a welcome one. Now, while this is all very clever harmonically, finding related keys and moving around, etc., it's not necessarily something I would recommend for a dance track, or even a pop track, unless you are deliberately trying to surprise or confuse your audience as a part of the narrative in the track. Pulling a stunt like this risks losing your audience more often than not. So, to answer the Neglected Goat's original question, yes, you can change keys after chopping up a vocal, but I would not recommend it. I just spent 6 minutes explaining something I don't recommend you do. However, we can glean a top tip from this. If you have a sample which isn't quite fitting right and you suspect has been labelled wrong, which, let's face it, is rather common these days, you can use the circle of fifths system to find out the key it probably is in, and that should work. So if it's kind of working, but something's a bit off, try pitch shifting it, plus or minus 7 or 5, and that will get you to your nearest related key. Now, one more thing I do recommend is to leave me more questions and feedback in the comments, or press some buttons you see appropriate. If you're feeling extra thankful, there's a link in the description to buy me a coffee, or if you want a free way to help out, you can watch the next video that YouTube is about to recommend. So until next week, I'll see you in the comments. Bye bye.